Well, we'll continue from here. So 1587, a year of no significance, the Ming Dynasty in decline. Ray Huang, I hope that's pronounced correctly. I'm pronouncing it as if he was Korean, but we'll give it a try. He writes this. In discharging these responsibilities, this is the county magistrate, the lowest level official there is in charge of a whole county, actually implemented a kind of indirect rule. He must invite and inspire the support of the local gentry. This group of retired officials, students of imperial universities, nominated scholars, and some purchasers of rank, being men of substance in rural communities, could be induced to make their influence prevail over the populace until taxes were paid on time, disputes settled behind the scenes rather than flaring up in lawsuits, the poor taken care of by their clans rather than, say, becoming beggars or thieves, widows never remarried, talk more about that later, and the filially pious, that means love, honoring, respecting your parents, commanded respect in the district and were imitated. Only under these conditions would the district earn its reputation of being pure and honest, and its magistrate would make his own name as a good parental official. You obey your parents, right? Well, you should obey the magistrate because he's kind of like your parent, right? Magistrates are sometimes called a father and mother to the people, not one who was frivolous and unstable. Well, great, the gentry are the solution to all the problems, right? They take good care of you. Right? They're going to help you out. Right? You can already, well, just one second, I'll ask you. Right? Apologize. Remember, what does the government care most about? Taxes are paid, and we maintain stability. That's what all this is about. Paying taxes, preventing issues from becoming problems. Okay, Dylan, what do you see as a problem?
What if somehow, I don't know how, but what if some reason they don't like you? So then you will be known as frivolous and unstable. Yeah, you have to make them like you. Yes. So that could lead to more corruption because you may not have enough money to give your superiors, aka the gentry.
Well, the gentry are your superiors. I'm talking about superior officials. But you're right that you have to keep them happy.
In a social sense.
Right. Yeah. So excellent. So the key point that Dylan's made is you got to keep the gentry happy, right? What happens if these guys aren't happy? So this is where the problem comes in, right? So you have this alliance. The gentry help government officials rule. The government officials rule in a way that benefits the gentry and affirms their position, right? So as a government official, I'm not going to do anything that makes the gentry look bad. I'm going to make sure that rather than making them look bad, I'm going to make them look good, right? Give them degrees, right? Honor them. That kind of thing. Do anything that raises up their social prestige. So this alliance allows for social and political stability. This is one reason why this system works so well. But there's a problem. It allows the government to rule, but often at the cost to the common people. To help common people, remember we said that there's not enough money? This is a common problem that China has throughout its early history. It never has enough money. Well, wouldn't the logical thing be to tax the rich? That would make a lot of sense. How do we increase? The common people need to be taken better care of. Our tax rates are low. We could tax wealthy people and it won't hurt them much. Why don't we help them? Or why don't we tax them? Well, we can't govern without their help. Right? So as Dylan was saying, we've got to keep these people happy. How do we keep them happy? We don't tax them. We let them accumulate wealth. We don't tax it. Or we keep tax rates to a bare minimum. That hurts the poor. If it hurts them too badly, they rebel. Right? And so in the end, the government cannot alienate the class that needs to govern. It cannot alienate the gentry. The people who can easily pay the price then are the common people. And in a sense, that's why we're going to have a communist revolution later on. Because of this fundamental problem. Okay, so we're going to go to gender shortly, but I do want to mention a couple things very quickly. So there's 4 status groups in Chinese society, and this this spread into Korea and Japan, right? So you can guess which, and this is hierarchical, but I put them in alphabetical order. Easy to guess who's on top. Officials, right? They're considered the highest status group. Who do you think is second? Harder. Farmers are second because they produce the food we all need. Right? Farmers are second. I need to look up the Chinese characters, but there's a saying in Chinese, farmers are the basis of heaven. Farmers are the foundation of all under heaven. Can't live without farmers. We need government to organize things, but next important are farmers, right? Because we all need to eat. So what's the third most important? Artisans. They make stuff we need. We need tools, right? So we need, farmers can't work without tools. We need artisans. Merchants are on the bottom. Why? Well, how do they make money? They get you to buy things you don't need. They get you to pay a price higher for a good than what it's worth. That's the Confucian view. I actually, when I teach world history, I talk a lot of good things about merchants. But Confucians generally look down on merchants. This is a problem that will become an issue later on in China. Right? They look down on merchants. Right? But for now, I just want us to understand this, and it's because merchants are seen as not productive. In fact, they can lure people, get people to waste money and things like that. There are other groups like Buddhist priests, actors, slaves, prostitutes that were considered outcasts who didn't fit into this, but the vast majority of people fell into one of these four categories. That's how the Chinese saw society. Now we're going to talk about gender and family, but really quick. We'll start section 2 Monday, if not today. We're not going to start today. Always takes longer than I hope. Syllabus quiz is due by Sunday. Remember, you can take that as many times as you want. Review quiz will open Friday after class and then close at 11:59 p.m. Sunday. The reading quiz will open today and close at 11:59 p.m. Sunday. So just keep that in mind. So we need to talk a little bit about how gender works, right? We talked about how the government works in traditional China. We talked about how society works. Now we're talking a bit about gender. And this was very patriarchal, so please bear with me. I'm going to be really patriarchal as I give this because it's going to be male focused because that's how society was, right? I don't like that, but I have to present it in that perspective so you can understand this. So first of all, in Chinese society, having sons was really important. And they had a very strong idea that a daughter left her family where sons stay with the family. So my sons will take care of me for the rest of my life. But my daughter, I may love my daughter, but she's going to go join another family, and her duty will fundamentally be with that family. And this has an economic dimension. When I invest money in a son, that money stays with me my whole life. But a daughter, she takes all that wealth away with her. Right? So if you had too many daughters, you were going to be poor. And you were going to have a hard life. Right? Because you wouldn't have anyone who was supposed to stay with you. Now, human beings being human beings, daughters still would try and take care of their parents. But they wouldn't be able to do it as much as a son could. And also, only sons could perform ancestor rites. Right? Remember those rituals that are done for the dead? And it was popularly believed that if you didn't have children to perform those ancestor rites for you, you'd become what's called a hungry ghost. You'd be eternally hungry because there was no one on earth to feed you. So you wanted to get a wife, right? And like I said, I'm being really patriarchal because this is how it was set up then. So you want to make sure that if you're a father, that you have a son, and that you get your son a wife. So you want to arrange a marriage for your son. This has nothing to do with romantic love, at least at first. The idea is that in order to function economically and socially, you got to have sons. It just doesn't work other than that. You want to have someone to take care of you. There's no Social Security. You want to have someone take care of you when you get old, you got to have sons. You want to make sure that they have sons so that your line continues. So you want to get a wife. Men could divorce wives. Wives cannot divorce husbands. Patriarchal. There were 7 official reasons in Confucianism why you could divorce a wife. If she was disobedient to your parents, notice that's first. Wife who's disobedient to parents is a bad wife. Infertility, that's second. Notice that has nothing to do with her. I mean, it's not her fault. But in any case, that's second. Your job is to produce kids, especially sons. You're not producing any. We need someone else who can. Adultery. Adultery, when we think about adultery, it's offensive, right? Because you're betraying someone who you supposedly love. But remember, for this group, or for people in this time period especially, that may mean that your kids that you think are your kids aren't your kids, right? If a woman gets pregnant by someone else, you think that's your child. And it's supposed to be your children that perform the ancestor rites, or at least children from your family. Sometimes when Chinese people couldn't have sons, they would adopt a nephew, because at least it's the family. But this would be someone else's family. We don't want that. It's got to be a biologically related person. You could divorce, this is really shocking, right? You could divorce a wife out of illness. Right? In the Western tradition, what are the wedding vows? To have and to hold the richer and poor and in health. That's the oath I took. Right.
be part.
Exactly. So very different. Jealousy. You get in trouble if you're jealous. Why? Well, your husband, instead of divorcing you because you're infertile, because you only were having daughters, at the time they blamed the woman if she had daughters. They didn't realize it's the man's fault. He would take concubines. And of course, if the concubine started having sons, he would probably treat the concubine better than you. You just have to put up with it. Don't be jealous of concubines. Talking too much or nagging. You could also divorce a wife for that. And for theft, which I think is, I always was curious about theft. This is a very patriarchal culture, but there are things that try and soften it. I'm not saying this makes it okay, but there are things that try and soften it. One of these things is, if you were married to a woman and you became wealthy, you could not then divorce her. Because it was understood that you could only become wealthy if the woman helped you. Right? It was impossible to become wealthy unless a woman helped you. So you can't just throw away your wife because you get rich and you want a prettier, younger wife. Yes, Dr. Hess?
A question.
Sure.
How about if the husband is the one infertile? Like my husband, I could have divorced him.
Well, no, it only works for men, right? Only men can divorce women, and this time women can't divorce men. That will be something that, I don't know if the nationalists did it. I know the communists did it. The communists, I know, were allowed women to file for divorce. I don't know if the nationalists did. But that's a good point, right? The other thing that's interesting, too, in Confucianism, when your parents died, you were supposed to mourn them ideally for 3 years. You were supposed to go into mourning. And this was serious stuff. It meant like you had to wear uncomfortable clothes. Like you couldn't wear cotton or silk. You should wear clothes made of hemp, which is very rough. You shouldn't drink wine. And this should go on for 3 years. And they would say that on your parents' grave, there should be no grass. Because you should be there every day on their grave, like weeping. If your wife did that, if she mourned your parents, you could not divorce her. Right? If she went through that process, you were not allowed to divorce her. So you couldn't just divorce your wife. You had to have reasons. Some of the reasons, I think, I'm not saying these are good reasons, but you had to have reasons. And women did have some protection. Not necessarily a lot. But a woman's primary job was to give birth to sons. Just as an aside, if you're interested in gender in the family, what they're bearing the placenta. That's what they're doing here. She's just given birth, and they're bearing the placenta. You got to think about, how do you dispose of something that's part of a person's body, right? You want to do that respectfully. In Korea, I think in China too, when they had a king would have a child, they would bury their placenta in like a special place and have a monument over it. I think the idea is that they were afraid that someone could do magic to you, right? They could do something bad to you if they had access to your body like that. Kind of interesting. So there were some gender differences, as we've seen before, and I need to kind of highlight these a little bit more. The relationship between husband and wife was hierarchical. It was not equal. So for example, if you were to say, wait a second, why is it guys can have concubines and they can go to prostitutes and that's cool, but wives can't? Well, the response would be, just as the emperor can have many officials, and officials can only have one emperor, so too can a husband have many wives, but a wife must be loyal to only one husband. Just as parents can have many children, children can only have one mother and one father. Therefore, a wife being equivalent to a child, or the officials, the subordinate person, she is only allowed one. You can't be loyal to two people. You can only be loyal to one. That's the idea. And women were also expected to undergo what were called the 3 followings. What this means is when you are a girl, you follow your father. When you are a wife, you follow your husband. If your husband should die, you follow your eldest son. Right? You follow your eldest son. You got to do what your son says, which is kind of curious, but that's how it worked. Again, this was softened because Chinese people talked about the importance of affection between husband and wife. It wasn't necessarily love, but they talked about affection. And you kind of think about it this way. If you've ever been a member of like a team, you don't know your teammates. You don't choose your teammates. But over time, working together as a team, you develop certain, hopefully good feelings towards each other, especially if you're a good team. So you maybe don't know, the husband and wife maybe don't know each other. They get married because they know they have to if they want to live in society. You cannot exist in Chinese society without children. You're going to have a hard life. Got to get married, got to have kids. Who's going to take care of you when you get old otherwise? But through that process of living together, of having children together, oftentimes people develop real affection towards each other. Right? And one thing you may experience if you're in a good marriage is that you'll find that your love actually goes stronger as you grow through these things together. Right? So there is something softening this, but this is still a patriarchal society. And like I said, you want to have boys Only boys can perform ancestor rites. They're the ones that stay with you. When they talk about keeping the family line going, they're talking about the male family line, not the female family line. Right? That's the focus. And there's this goal, there's this desire to make sure that your family line is yours. Remember, it follows through the men. That's what Chinese are most focused on. A little bit different from Korea. In Korea, they were very concerned with the woman's status. In Chinese society, typically, children inherited the father's status. So you were very much obsessed with making sure that your kids were your kids, biologically speaking. So women were expected to be chaste. Right? They were expected not only not to have sex with other men, but to have, if they were high class, to have no contact with men who weren't related to them. That was the goal. You don't have contact with other men, you can't cheat on your husband. That's the idea. So women were often, especially wealthier women, which is kind of curious when we think about it, were often had less opportunities to interact with the outside world. You want to keep women away from other men so they don't have kids that aren't yours. Husbands, on the other hand, were encouraged to have as many kids as they could, right? And with as many women as they could if they had the wealth. So you typically had one legal wife, but then you could have concubines who were legally recognized. Right? There was nothing wrong. In fact, you could be admired and respected for having a concubine. Sometimes the first wife didn't mind. Sometimes the first wife was very upset if the husband took a concubine. Other times they were happy because it meant their husband wouldn't bother them as much. I'm not kidding. And sometimes it was also considered high status. If you can afford another woman, you get more respect. And I use that on purpose. I know that sounds terrible when you think about what I just said, but that's how it worked. And what I think is really striking about this is it was understood that this chastity even should continue after a woman's husband died. So if you were like in your 30s and your husband died, ideally you wouldn't remarry. Poor women didn't have a choice, they remarried typically. But if you were high class, it was pretty much expected you're not going to remarry. What's unfortunate too is betrothal was considered remarriage, or was considered marriage. So if you're like 12 and you're betrothed to a guy and then he dies, and you're high class, you're never going to marry. And they would have what they would call virgin widows, right? Women who had never had sex, but who were considered widows because they were married. Yes, Brandon.
So how was it if the females were encouraged not to seek out other men? What women were the males seeking out then? If they were encouraged to get with the concubines, was it poorer women or was it?
A lot of times, yeah, it would be women who were poor, right? And you would occasionally have people, they have a lot of daughters, and you could buy a wife in a sense. And that sounds bad, but it's not that the women were considered property, but this person had made an economic investment in taking care of his daughter. I mean, he still loves his daughter, but it's just, he needs money. You got to survive. These people don't have a lot of wealth. And that's how you could acquire a concubine. So it's not like slavery exactly. She still had rights, but she still had to go where she was told to go. Does that make sense? Excellent. Yes, Tyler.
These virgin widows, even if their husband dies at such a young age, are they allowed to marry like rich bachelors? Or they,
Well, and so here's the key thing, and the key thing is that it's not like a law; it was custom. And only wealthy people were expected to follow this custom. If you were poor, it's not an issue. You remarried, right? But this is the ideal, right? And sometimes poor women would follow this ideal. And it was a way of asserting that they were high status in a sense by performing virtue, if that makes sense. So I need to talk a little couple other, I feel bad, this is a terrible way to end things on a Friday, but I'm talking about more issues, difficulties women faced, right? Because especially if we want to understand what happens later in modern China, we have to understand the difficulties here. So in China, people in different cultures understand different parts of a human body as being beautiful, and they tend to focus on different things. So sometimes those understandings change over time. One thing that was in China was it was thought that women who had small feet were attractive. So what happened was there developed a custom among elite women, poor women could not do this because their labor was needed, that the women would engage in feet binding. So this is her big toe, right? These are her other toes. They've been bent under her foot. And you did this by applying tight bandages to a girl's feet over time, and it would eventually make this shape. As you can guess, this made walking painful and difficult, so only wealthy people could do this, right? But this shows how, in some ways, it's kind of curious because poor women often had more freedom than wealthy women, right? Poor women did not go through this. But, men did not go through a similar thing. Now, one thing I want to stress This existed, and some people liked this, but some people also were critical. There were Chinese authors who wrote stories criticizing this. What's funny is there's one Chinese author who wrote a story about a Chinese guy who went to another country, and everything was reversed. So what happened to him is everything that was done to women in his country, in China, was done to him. So he had his foot bound, they pulled out all his eyebrows and painted on new eyebrows. He's like, oh, this is terrible. There was a sympathy, but that was it. They couldn't change it. That will happen later. And to give you a sense of how difficult this could be, and this is something, I feel bad, I'm not trying to be, I really hate talking about this because it's disturbing and I don't want to be just like too critical of China, but we have to understand why this is an issue and it's going to cause problems later. Then we say, what's disturbing about this? They're giving a kid a bath. They are not giving the kid a bath. There's a book called Drowning Girls in China. Okay. So remember, girls take wealth with them when they leave. So the problem is if you have too many girls, you're going to become impoverished. So one way that people dealt with that was that they would drown girls when they were born. Right? You're not sure. Remember, there's no ultrasounds. You don't know if the child's a boy or a girl. And what I want to point out, Romans and other societies did this too. I'm not trying to pick on China, but this is a class on China. And of course, one way to easily dispose of a child or to kill a child would be to drown the child because they're just born, right? They can't do anything about it. So now we know it's a boy or a girl. It's a girl. Fill a bucket of water. Put her face down in the bucket, it's over very quickly. And that's what they would do. And again, this is a reality and something we have to understand later. In China, because it was so male-centered, there were never enough women for men, if that makes sense. The gender ratio was off. Right? There were too many men and not enough women because men, in a sense, were so valuable and women were considered expensive that people committed infanticide to the point that there weren't enough girls. We'll talk more about social ramifications for that later. Right now we're thinking about the perspective of women. Now again, people didn't necessarily like this. So this is from a book published by members of the gentry. Right? The gentry are concerned with social affairs. So they published a book and this shows the practice, but then it's critical of the practice. I love this painting. This painting, especially if you're an art major, several things are going on here at once. This is not something all happening at one time. This is showing several things in the same place, but that happened at different times. So this woman drowned a baby girl. That's the baby girl. Her feet are up there. Later she had a son. But because she drowned the girl, later she gave birth to this thing. And it killed her, and her son saw it and was horrified and he died. So remember, heaven is benevolent. Heaven cares about us. Heaven is really angry if you kill babies. Not happy about it at all. So this is heaven's punishment. Oh, you wanted sons? And you killed baby girls? Well, now you're going to die and your son's going to die. So this is how the book's trying to get you not to kill baby girls. So this existed, this happened. Didn't mean Chinese people liked it. They didn't like it, a lot of them. And this was meant to discourage that. And to give you some more images, this is from Buddhism. This is like popular Buddhism. This husband and wife killed baby girls. So you know King Yama from Dragon Ball Z? That's him. That's King Yama. They're being punished for killing baby girls by being transformed into animals, a pig and a dog that will be eaten. Right? That's heaven's revenge on them. And Buddhism is kind of connected here. And then I really like this one. This is the reverse. This is a midwife. This is a woman who just gave birth to the girl. The baby girl is still alive. Right? She's kicking her feet. And this woman is saying, look, don't you know that the gods are watching you and keeping track of what you're doing? And they will punish you, so you should not do this. So she ends up saving the girl's life. They end up deciding, okay, we'll take care of the girl. And they pull her out of the bucket. And so that woman this woman here is rewarded by having lots of grandsons. So it shows the complexity, right? In one side is trying to say we should treat baby girls well. Why should you treat baby girls well? So you can have sons and grandsons. Because boys are great. We just shouldn't kill girls. I love this part, by the way. That's cute. This is my favorite reward, though. This is a government official who supported the book. And my Chinese is not very good, but I can read this. It says, "Save the weak, appearance change." What was his reward for publishing the book and saving baby girls? Can you guess? He got a beard. That's the reward. You get a beard if you save baby girls, right? That's cool. Okay, that's a good place to stop. I